Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In today's episode, I wanted to have a debrief on what we understanding is currently happening in the former state of Ethiopia. And yes, I continue to say that as it is very much a fractured and dysfunctional nation state, if you want to call it a nation state. I would more likely be prone to calling it something along the lines of a pseudo state, a pseudo city state, with its primary power focus in Addis Ababa, with a lot of dysfunctional states surrounding that very large state. Now, the map that you're looking at now is inaccurate. And I'm going to tell you that from the very, very start. Now, this is the Wikipedia map as of today, 2025, October. If you look up north, you have Tigray, which is essentially semi-independent, militarily independent from the Abiy loyalist forces based in the city-state of Addis Ababa. But you really have to go back to, I would say, the pre-Pretoria Agreement, back towards 2021, to really get a good idea of what was happening on the ground and kind of why we are where we're at today. So you have the Tigray region, which had rebelled against the Abiy Ahmed-led city-state of Addis Ababa, with its Amharan and various other allied forces that had then attacked the Tigray region. And at the start of the Pretoria Agreement back in 2022, if you look at the Tigray region, it was fighting a multi-front conflict. It was fighting against this is Sparta regime of Isaias Afwerki of Eritrea. It was fighting against the Abiy Ahmed loyalist forces of Ethiopia. It was fighting against the special forces and militia units of the Amhara region. It was and is essentially surrounded. So we have the start of the Pretoria Agreement, which essentially ended high-intensity combat operations. All sides, for the most part, stopped fighting. The actors, Debrestrian, probably pronouncing that a little off, apologize for that, heads up the TPLF, the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, that is joined with the Tigrayan Defense Forces, with various Tigrayan battlefield commanders and generals that are still present and still command forces in the field. You have Getachew Reda. This was the individual that was sent down to South Africa to essentially head up and create the now defunct Pretoria Agreement. We think that Mr. Getachew Reda was compromised in South Africa. Look, when you're fighting in the hills without electricity, without running water, and suddenly you're staying in a South African villa, and you're being told, "Hey, come to Addis Ababa, and we will let you live a very comfortable life." Going from fighting in the hills to living in a very, very nice villa with a very nice salary, living a very comfortable life, can be difficult to say no to. And then hence the Pretoria Agreement was created under those conditions. Isaias Afwerki. This is Sparta. Yes, head of Eritrea, the Spartan-like nation state where every man and woman is at some point serving in the armed forces of Eritrea. Some cases for many, many years forcibly. Abiy Ahmed, the dictator of the former state of Ethiopia, now the city-state of Addis Ababa. Yes, the city-state. Now, what's interesting is, let's go back to the map where we can kind of get a bearing on exactly where we're at now. So again, we were in a state where everyone is attacking the Tigray region, and to some extent very unsuccessfully. At one point, in all probability, militarily, the Tigray region, the TDF, could have made a move on Addis Ababa. At one point, the Tigrayan military was in a position to move on the capital of Ethiopia. Didn't do that because of external pressure placed on the TDF not to move on and seize control of Addis Ababa. It stopped. It gave Abiy Ahmed the ability to then essentially rearm with some very high-tech drones and then prevent any further military offensives by the Tigrayan Defense Forces from moving on to Addis Ababa. And then so, after massive mobilization, did we start to see counterattacks by the Abiy loyalist forces. Now, going back to kind of where we're at now, this northern section here is not actually controlled by the Abiy loyalist forces. Again, the TDF is still very much militarily functioning in Tigray. Now, what has changed? Well, the Amhara region. At one point, very much allied with the Abiy loyalist forces. However, Mr. Abiy Ahmed, understanding that he wants to be in full control, wants to have the full dictatorial powers of a tyrant, decided that he was going to eliminate Amharan regional forces. The Amharan region then declared, no, you're not going to do that. We're going to keep our regional forces. And this has led now to the conflict that we're seeing now between the Abiy Ahmed city-state in Addis Ababa fighting against large elements of Amharan regional forces. So essentially, another civil war taking place in the former state of Ethiopia. So you have a minor insurgency taking place in the Oromia region. You have an industrial strength insurgency now taking place in the Amhara region. And at the same time, Eritrea, up here in the north, under Isaias Afwerki, received word that Abiy Ahmed was eyeing territories inside of Eritrea, specifically Red Sea ports. Abiy Ahmed very much wants control over Red Sea ports. However, from just a purely military standpoint, that is something that would be very, very difficult to do. I'll try to show you why here. So if we look at Eritrea, we can see Ethiopia, we can see the Tigray region, the Amhara region. So the only real route into Eritrea is through the Tigray region. Abiy Ahmed requires the full control of the Tigray region in order to enter Eritrea. Now you have this area here to the south-southeast of Mekelle that would seem like the quickest route to Assab, the Red Sea port. This location here. This is really what Abiy Ahmed would like to get a hold of, but he can't. There is not adequate infrastructure to move from Assab with large elements of the Ethiopian army north and take control of this area. There's one way in, there's the A1 highway, and the Eritrean army would create blocking forces that would essentially make it very, very difficult for the Abiy loyalist forces to move up this P7 highway and then seize control of Assab. It'd be very difficult to do. Logistically, very difficult. So he needs control. Abiy Ahmed needs control of Tigray. He has to control it. He has to fully control it. He has to eliminate the TDF. He has to subjugate the Tigrayan population, most likely forcing Tigrayans to fight for Abiy Ahmed himself in this possible invasion of Eritrea to seize control of these ports along the Red Sea coast. In order to do this, again, capturing fully Tigray and then launching an invasion using staging points in Tigray to move on to the Eritrean capital. Now, when will this happen? Difficult to say. Probably after the death of Isaias Afwerki. But problem is, Isaias Afwerki is like the Energizer bunny rabbit. He just keeps ticking. He's not going anywhere. But Isaias Afwerki gets word that Abiy Ahmed is eyeballing, again, looking to take control over those Eritrean ports, or Eritrea port. But in order to do that, again, this is not the best route into Eritrea. The best route is eventually going into the capital of Eritrea, removing the Eritrean leadership, and essentially taking control over Eritrea. So what happens next? Well, Debrechtyan decides, well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yes, was the Tigrayan Defense Forces at one point fighting the armies of Eritrea? Yes, they were. That was happening. However, it was now more likely that Abiy Ahmed, with his newfound advisor, Getachew Reda, would in all probability look to completely take control of Tigray, to create that staging area for a military operation against Eritrea. Now, other things have happened in conjunction with, obviously, the war that has taken place in Tigray. The Amhara region has risen. The Amharan regional forces, the Amharan special forces, quote unquote, have risen up against the Abiy loyalist forces. There is now an industrial strength insurgency taking place in the Amhara region. That's an opportunity for the TDF, the Tigrayan Defense Forces. So, with the understanding that Abiy Ahmed is eventually looking to take complete control of Tigray and then move into Eritrea, this may be an opportunity to cause a lot of problems for Abiy Ahmed. That is currently, we believe, the strategy of Debretsion. Now, keep in mind, again, very, very complicated. At one point, Greta Chureta was in a position of power in the Tigray region. Back in 2024, Debretsion said, nope, you're done. You're too close to Abiy Ahmed. You're not acting in the good faith of the Tigrayan people. Time to go. And Greta Chureta was sent packing to his villa in Addis Ababa. And I'm sure he's comfortable. I'm sure he's happy. And in all probability, that's probably where he will stay. But that is where we're at right now. We are seeing the positioning of forces and strategy taking place. Yes, we are seeing this relationship that exists. How deep it really exists, difficult to say, between the Tigrayan Defense Forces, the TPLF, and the regime of Isaias Afwerki. Remember, the enemy of my enemy, is my friend. Abiy Ahmed needs control of Tigray, needs to eliminate the TDF, needs full control in order to have future-facing operations in Eritrea. But Abiy Ahmed has more problems than that. He's facing multiple insurrections. The Amhara region, the Oromia region. He still faces a very robust capability in the Tigray Defense Forces in Tigray. And now he has Eritrea and Isaias Afwerki putting a microscope over his intentions in terms of his strategy and desires on Red Sea ports, Abiy Ahmed. And that's where we sit. So in all likelihood, the status quo will continue, meaning Abiy loyalist forces will continue to fight the Amharan Special Operations Forces and militias in the Amhara region. The Amhara region has essentially risen up, probably 20,000 plus of the original Amharan regional forces have taken up arms against the federal government. The Tigrayan Defense Forces have consolidated hold over areas in the Tigray region, with the exception of western Tigray at this point. The Eritrean army is making contingency plans and positioning itself for a possible future-facing threat of Abiy loyalist forces. But again, based on what's happening in the Amhara region and the Oromia region, that continues to simmer. In all likelihood, the Abiy loyalist forces won't have that capability to move into Tigray, take full control over Tigray, and then, in all probability, enter Eritrea. They won't have that capability because of what's happening in the Amhara region right now. And in all likelihood, yes, the Tigrayan Defense Forces and intelligence elements within both Eritrea and Tigray are probably a factor in that conflict, because it's in their best interest to see that conflict take place. It's better to have Abiy loyalist forces fighting the Amhara region regional militias than having Amhara region regional militias in conjunction and allied with Abiy loyalist forces attacking Tigray. Pretty smart plan, actually. And that's where we're at. Now you compound this to what's happening in Sudan, and then obviously it's a really bad situation just for the people of these regions. It's very, very harsh period of time. So that's where we sit as of today, or that's my take on it. Feel free to comment in the comment section. And as always, thanks for joining us. Have a good day.